For over 20 years, the Fire Store has equipped first responders with the best in firefighting gear. Discover seasonal savings on the gear you trust and visit thefirestore.com to shop everything but the truck.
All right, so good evening, good morning, or good afternoon, depending on wherever or whenever you're listening. I will always start with gratitude. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to the Perspectives on Leadership podcast brought to you by Fire Engineering. My name is Steve Shaw. I'm proud to be the Deputy Fire Chief for the town of Jupiter Fire Rescue Department and honored to be part of the Fire Engineering family as an author, as a presenter at FDIC, and as a host for this podcast. So I always say this in the beginning, everybody has their choice of which podcast to listen to. There's a ton out there for you to digest, and I'm just honored that you're choosing to listen to this one. The goal continues to be, for this podcast, as it was since day one, that's to provide value to the listener and provide tactical ways to deploy the ideals of leadership that we're going to be talking about. So thank you to David Rhodes, Diane Rothschild, and the Clarion team for allowing me to have this platform. And thank you to my fire chief for allowing me to continue to operate this platform and interact and learn from our people in the field and provide value for the fire service. So greetings. It is mid-November 2025. I was thinking lately a lot of looking back in the fire service. And for me, it's been about 30 years since I've been in. I'm on this interesting journey as a deputy chief for this new town of Jupiter Fire Rescue Department. And I'm finding myself reviewing notes through all the conferences and classes I've attended through the years. So as I'm going through all these notes, and I got notes from everybody. I got notes from, Guston and Halton and Viscuso and Rhodes and the Stone brothers. I got notes for days, right? And I often reach back to see what I wrote down, what stuck with me, and what's still relevant today. Like, what am I following? What have I chose not to follow? What's different now? And as I look back, I find myself focusing on a variety of things. And these days, especially, I'm focusing on the teams I was a part of or that I led, the initiatives that I spearheaded or was a part of, and the experience that comes with the job. And then I look to see what worked and what didn't. What went well, what didn't, what projects took flight, and which one of those projects fell flat. And most of all, I ask myself, why? Like, why did something work and why did things not work maybe? And as I kind of go through this, down the rabbit hole we go, right? So here's what I landed on, and that's the idea of expectations. So for myself, there's this realization that when things didn't go well, or projects didn't succeed, or relationships became strained, it was because, for a large part, for me, I did not set clear expectations. And as I was going through these notes, I was reading some of the notes that I took while I was in Mark vonAppen's Fully Involved presentation many, many years ago. And I remember taking notes on expectations and writing down the things he was putting up there, like the 10 for me and the 10 for you. And as I kept reflecting on this, I'm like, you know what? Let me just give him a call and catch up a little bit and kind of explain to him that those things that I was looking at back then matter more today than they ever did in the past. So I called him and we started talking, and within, I swear, it must have been 3 to 4 minutes, we both realized we have to stop talking because what we're doing right here is podcast gold. So I'm honored to welcome Mark vonAppen here today. But before I introduce him, there was 3 things that I was thinking of as I was preparing for this podcast. And that was the idea, one, of course, of this idea of clear expectations. And I'm really excited to dive into this with Mark because when I think about those, I think of him first when it came to his presentations and him focusing on that. The second thing is communications in today's age. Mark also wrote an article earlier this year called I'm Here in Fire Engineering, and it kind of spoke to me in terms of weaving that concept into what we're going to be talking about today. And the third thing is what to do when we are in a place where the expectations were not set and we are struggling, maybe how to reset those and how to recalibrate that. So if you haven't heard of Mark, I'm surprised, but today I'm honored to have Mark vonAppen with us on the podcast. Mark is a retired 27-year veteran of the California Fire Service, where he has served as captain in the suppression division. His career took him across a variety of roles, from battling fires in both urban and wildland urban interfaces to leading a ladder company and shaping firefighters through training. Mark also has contributed to the development of firefighter survival and rapid intervention curriculums as a committee member for the California State Fire Training. And accomplished author, he's been published in Fire Engineering Magazine, Fire Service Warrior, and is the creator of the popular leadership blog Fully Involved. Since 2015, Mark has been a featured speaker at FDIC and has traveled nationwide sharing his insights on leadership and team building. So I'm excited to dive into his experiences, the lessons learned, and his perspectives on building strong, resilient fire service teams. So Mark, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to, be going on 2 years retired and still have people, want to talk to you. It's nice.
Well, well, first of all, let me start with this. You're in California. I'm in Florida. It's mid-November. And if anybody's watching this podcast, they might be wondering why I'm wearing a job shirt, but apparently in the rest of the country, it's job shirt season. I don't get to wear this, but this morning it happens to be really stupid cold in Florida, so I am wearing it. It's also No Shave November, so you're welcome. You're welcome. My wife is waiting for me to shave this, so this might be the last time it actually gets seen. But it's also, by the way, iguana falling out of trees season in South Florida. Just so you know, that's a thing, by the way. That's a thing. We have a lot of invasive iguanas, and after a certain temperature, they literally freeze and they fall out of trees. So it's a hazard for us down here. Just so you're aware. I don't
Do
know if
they
you
warm up and are they okay? I mean, I'm really concerned for the iguana population down there, even though they're invasive. I mean,
they're not dead. They're actually just frozen. They kind of just like go into this weird state of pseudo hibernation, and they're just stopped. And I got a buddy of mine, Danny Moran, who works in Fort Lauderdale. He has this great story. He found one on the road one day, and he thought he'd be nice just by picking it up and moving it off the road. And when he picked it up, the eyes on the iguana locked it with his, and he saw him. And suddenly it became alive and started whipping him in the face with the tail. And those tails on those iguanas are literally like whips. Like they will hurt you.
Yeah. So if I can real quick, I know that, you guys in Florida are looking for any excuse to wear something warm like a job shirt, right? Because it doesn't get that cold there very often. So congratulations on job shirt season. And I'm glad you could break that thing out and dust it off. I loved mine when I was working. And also, you guys can have Florida like 100%. You can have that whole area. I mean, you guys have every scourge known to man. You guys are like Australia. Did Florida start off as a prison colony? Is that what happened? Like, because you guys have alligators, sharks, iguanas, pythons, crocodiles, rattlesnakes. I mean,
it's a diverse population.
I don't think that there's a fire department. I may be wrong. I'm speaking completely out of turn. This is hyperbole, but I don't think there's an apartment in California that has a venom unit. And when you said that, we were talking earlier that you had a buddy that worked on the venom unit, I thought it was like I'm like, oh, the movie Venom? I don't even know what he's talking about. So anyway, congratulations on surviving Florida.
It's special down here. It really is.
It is. Yeah. Special people.
Yeah. So Mark, I'm happy that we got together. Like you said, man, it's wonderful that we get to keep connecting, and I think that, like I said, when I was going through these notes, just some of the things you had presented on back then just speak more to me today than ever before. So I think a lot of people know you, and if they don't know you, they got to know Fully Involved, man. So let's start there, man. Between your history in the fire service leading up into the creation of Fully Involved, what does that look like? Like, where did that come from? What does that journey in the fire service look like for you, man?
Where did Fully Involved come from? Well, it came from with the sort of growth of blogging and a lot of fire service content being put on the internet. You mentioned earlier in my background that I had done some work for Fire Service Warrior, and that was I don't remember how I got introduced to that, but that was the work of Chris Brennan, and he had written the book, The Combat Position, and a lot of what he was doing in terms of firefighter mindset and fitness and that type of stuff, I really gravitated towards, because I really felt, as I worked my way through my fire service career, that, during the academy, I felt a little bit disappointed as I came out of that because I wasn't particularly challenged. I wanted to be challenged more, I thought. And then, so as I found his work, I mean, he was, pretty extreme. He was into a lot of CrossFit stuff, a lot of, real interesting mindset stuff to me that really spoke to me. And through that, I was introduced to Brian Brush, Gary Lane, a number of different people, Jonah Smith, and Aaron Fields eventually. And a lot of, guys who are still doing really amazing things in the fire service came out of that realm. And so I was fortunate enough to meet a lot of really great people. And from that, felt like I was getting a lot of ideas from a lot of different places, and it was all really good stuff. And I wanted to have an outlet for it, and tried to bring it back to my department. And like a lot of us who have a lot of ideas and get to know people and see that there is a world outside of our individual department, became fairly frustrated with my position in my department and the voice or lack thereof that I was experiencing at the time. And so, as sort of a creative outlet, as I was trying to promote to company officer, I was still a firefighter at the time, in training. I started writing just as a way to get it out. And that's really how Fully Involved started. And with the help of a lot of people, Brian Brush, chief among them, and some other guys. Rhett Flights was another one from, gosh, I can't remember what department he's from. I think it's Roanoke. But, he had a blog called The Fire Critic way back in the day. And I don't know if you remember that, but he would kind of post things that he found interesting, and he would sort of, sift through a lot of the stuff that was on the internet at the time and post it. And that's what really helped me get going in terms of having a voice and having a platform. And so it took a lot of people to help me get going, and I'm very thankful for that. So that's kind of where it started. I was frustrated in my department and causing, myself and some other people some heartburn. And I was told basically by my company officer that if I ever wanted to get promoted to captain, I needed to go in my room and disappear and just study and be quiet. And so I went in my room and I studied, and then I also wrote. I wrote about my frustrations. And I think that a lot of people felt the same way at the time. And if you look around now, the narrative is kind of the same. There's people that are, not being apologetic about being into the job and being excited about the job and caring about it and expressing that in different ways than we did, 20 years ago. So that's kind of where that's how it started. It started out of, gravitating towards a very motivated group of people, and being lucky enough to sort of, get into that group, and then have some people, lift me along the way and help, move some of my material around so that it was seen. And that's why it's so important when we meet new people who are excited about the job, that have something to say, that we help, further their cause as well, because there's a lot of new energy out there and new ideas. And just like people helped us, we need to help them.
So this is starting off in a wonderful place, because you mentioned a bunch of things, man. For example, you started off seeing the world outside, outside your bubble. You walked out, you saw other people, and you interacted with them, and they obviously impacted you. And you took that and kind of used that as maybe an impetus or a ground to start from. And, then you said you started writing. That outlet for you was writing. And it went to create so much more. And, listen, dude, I'm not trying to blow your skirt up or anything, but obviously when you pack a room the way you do, I wonder about that. That gives me a moment of pause. Like, what are people looking for? What's, from you is speaking to them. And, for me, for example, being in your presentation, I don't even know how many years ago, that idea of the little things I took away, like on expectations and the 10 for you, 10 for me, those kind of things, those things spoke to me. And I it's nice to know that even today, when you're going back to FDIC and everything, there's still that desire to learn and get more, And it's nice that you're still, even after retirement, influencing. You're relevant. I think some people struggle with maintaining that relevancy, but you're still in this, and it's exciting to continue the dialogue with you.
Thank you.
But good.
No, thank you. I mean, it's nice. Sometimes you don't necessarily feel that way, that you are still relevant. But I think what a lot of people relate to in all of the presentations, every presentation you go to, there's something to take away from it, and there's some positive energy to take away from it. But I think that what people take away from Fully Involved is that a lot of what I talk about speaks to the human condition. It's our trying to find meaning and trying to help the next generation avoid some of the struggles that we experienced. Maybe smooth the road for them a little bit, which isn't always possible. And struggle is what makes us who we are. Mm-hmm. And it's how we deal with it and how we come out of it. So we can't smooth the road for people entirely, but that's the thing. I mean, when I look around at what's going on in the fire service now, these are the same conversations we had 20 years ago. Guys are still pissed off because they're excited for the job and no one's listening to them, and they feel like everybody's a bunch of sheep and blah, 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 blah. I see it all the time because I see those TikTok feeds and all that other stuff and Instagram feeds. And that's how they communicate it now. My forum back in the old day when people used to sit down and read, I would write things that were on my mind. And now that's not the medium that people are using. But the struggle is real and the struggle is the same, and it's never going to change. I mean, the more that I go through, I read and listen to books on books on tape. I listen to the audiobooks, and I've been listening to a lot of Stoicism, and I've been working on getting through Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And when you listen to what he was thinking about, thousands and thousands of years ago, it's the exact same things that we ponder today. Why are we here? What are we doing? What does it all mean? What's it for? How do I get through this? How do I, it's so, in terms of trying to help people through life, which I think is what leaders do, that's never going to go away. So that's why I think it's leadership's always going to be relevant. There's going to be different voices, and eventually it's going to be time for me to disappear. But hopefully it's not right now.
No, and I think that I think one of the things going through my mind right now before I dive into the idea of expectations was that idea of giving people ideas for outlets. Like, in other words, you mentioned it just a second ago, yours was writing, and for me, it's kind of the same thing, whether it's writing, presenting, doing this podcast. It's a way to process. It's a way to take all these things, the frustrations, the positives, the negatives, and have a filter for it to learn. And I think also when you have that many people like attending your presentations, giving them something to walk away with on how they can process what they're thinking, and using what you're talking about as an example. But I want to dive into expectations, man, because I got to tell you, this has been on my mind for a while. And I said it briefly before, but as I reflect, I look back on my career and I realize that the failures I've had as a leader were because I did not set clear expectations. I mean, 99.9% of the times when I look back and realize, man, why didn't this work? Why did this initiative fall flat? Why did this team struggle? Why did this thing I'm working on just not do good? When I really reflect, among other little things, a lot of that had to do with the expectations, man. So I love that, when I reviewed my notes and I was looking through those, I'm like, man, it's just something it's crystal clear right in front of me. So let's talk about that for a second, man. Like, what drive you to even kind of put that into the presentation in the first place? What did that look like?
Well, it was conversations that I had with my father, and my father was a football coach. If people don't know my background, but he coached football for my entire life and was very successful at it for a long time. And when you talk to some of the players who I would run into occasionally, they always said that my dad was one of the greatest guys that they ever played for. And so there's something to that. And as someone who wanted to get into a leadership role in my department, I wanted to make sure that I had some tools in my toolbox to do it right. And I don't know that I set about like thinking about it in that way, but to me, I had seen so many people a lot of great leaders in my department, but a lot of people who sort of not necessarily failed at leadership, but maybe disappointed me. And that's sort of a horrible thing to say, but I was a little bit disappointed in some of what I expected out of leaders and what I was actually getting. So I wanted to make sure that when it came my turn, that I had some tools in my toolbox and some things that I could stand for. I knew they were in there because I was kind of raised with a certain belief system. I didn't know exactly how to articulate it until I had conversations with my dad about it specifically. And that was where he introduced me to the expectations talk that he had with his football players when he was coaching for 40 years on every level. So that's where that came from. And that's how I got it. And I was like, well, this is worth sharing. So I started sharing it with my crew and using it with my crew. And then as I was going through the self-exploration process of who I was trying to be as a leader in my organization, that's where the writing started. And that's where word started getting out and people started saying, hey, we'd like you to come to our department and talk to us about these expectations that you have and your leadership philosophy. So
And again, I believe in giving credit where credit's due, right? So I always reflect on that. And as part of my journey, when things went right is when I did set expectations. So for example, my first firehouse back in, I think it was 2010, Firehouse 46. My first time being a lieutenant at my firehouse, it was my engine, two rescues, medical rescue trucks. And I remember on day one, just sitting down, getting my crew together and setting those expectations. And it's amazing. It's not rocket science. It just worked. Like, hey, I want you to make sure you back the truck up when you back the truck in. I want to make sure we do this. I want to know where you are. We're going to train every day. These basic things. But I remember that once they were set, they were like, okay, this is the standard. This is the normal. Got it. And it just flowed. And I'm so glad I did that. And in just recent days, in the new department I'm with now, we just hired our 3 battalion chiefs. We had 76 people apply for battalion chief, and we hired 3 of them. We gave conditional job offers. And I sat down with some of them just in the last week, and I had that conversation. I said to him, one of the battalion chiefs who I've known for years, I sat down with him. I said, the times I failed in leadership is when I didn't set expectations. So let's talk about that. And the conversation that we had between us was so great. It was organic. It was great. It was granular. And it had us just reflecting on what worked in our careers, what worked in life. And we started sharing those expectations. And it was clear to us as we walked away what some of those standards were going to be. The way we were going to treat the citizens, the way we were going to focus on making having the community that loves us and the people that come to work love and come to work. And then we expanded on that, what that looked like in the real world. So just sitting down and having those conversations was just, I don't know if cathartic is the word, but it was just right. Like it just felt right. So, I just, like I said, I'm reflecting on that now and learning from the past, learning from the times that things did not work well and making sure I don't make those, or try as best I can not to make those mistakes again. But did you find that worked for you? In other words, when you were doing it at the station or when people were reflecting with you after, like, let's say attending your class or just from your conversations, what kind of experiences are you're hearing or seeing?
Well, as I listened to you recount your experience, the thing that I always think about is you can't hold people to a standard that you've never established. And so, people, as much as, we're mostly alpha type personalities in the fire service or emergency services, we want to know what the expectation is because we want to achieve and we want to please because we're just those types of people. So it just sets things off on the right foot when we just sit down and you're not being overbearing. You're just like, hey, this is how I operate. This is what works best for me as a company officer or a leader. And how can I tailor my leadership style to you? And that's why it's so important to have, not only, your expectations of your people as a company officer, but let them know what they can expect from you. And then ask them as well, what do you expect from me and what do you need? And I think that sometimes that's where, I certainly went wrong sometimes. I didn't have those conversations with people because in my case, in retrospect, maybe I thought that my reputation preceded me. And maybe I thought that I was a little bit, people know how Mark vonAppen operates. And so when they show up to my station or I show up to their station as a relief captain or an overtime captain, they should know I've been around and this is who I am and blah, blah, blah. And that's where you get into trouble. Even people that you consider to be high performers that you don't know well, they may stray because good people are like water. They're going to seek the lowest level, and so it's important that even with people that we consider to be high achievers or we think that they get it, it's important that we sit down and talk to them and have that open dialogue because that is the foundation for everything that leadership rests on. And that foundation is trust. And by sitting there and caring enough to sit down and talk to someone for a period of time and say, I care about you. I care enough about operations here and how we're going to operate over the next, period of time that we're working together to sit down and have build this personal relationship with you. And it's so important. And when I look back at exactly like you said, the failures that I experienced in leadership, and I did a lot, I didn't get it right all the time, and I'm trying to share some of those things more often because I think it makes you much more relatable. I mean, if you're a person who says, I've never made a mistake. I had a company officer who I worked for who said they never made one mistake, not once. Not once. And I was like, are you? And I was a firefighter. I'm like, are you kidding me right now? So, there are people that are high achievers and people that you think don't don't require a lot of external motivation to get going. But I think that one of the things that we can do for them, even these people that are seemingly completely self-motivated and just self-starters, sit down and talk to them and show that you care about them. That'll push them even further to do even more great things. So where I screwed up was, I thinking that, again, my reputation preceded me, and not having conversations with people because like, oh, I get them, they get me. Well, no, until we really start working together for an extended period of time, we can watch people from afar and think that they get it, and think they look cool in their uniform, and they got a leather helmet and a radio strap and a truck belt and all that stuff, and walk with some swagger, but they may have some things that they're working through too. So it helps us understand them. So
first of all, right there, I think the core of what you just said, a couple things, I think that first of all, it takes a lot of humility to make that statement. Like, maybe my reputation preceded me, right? But I think the biggest thing I've taken from this right now, and it's something that's been on my mind over the last year, and I'll explain why, is the idea that you don't assume. We don't assume.
100%.
Like, yeah. I literally just bought the book on Amazon the other day. It's on its way, called The 4 Agreements. And one of those agreements, and I don't know the author. I just bought it yesterday, but it was something that somebody suggested I read it. And one of those agreements is don't make assumptions. Here's something that I think you're going to find very interesting. I'm part of a team that's building a fire department, right? So what I've learned, one of the main things I've learned over the last year and a half is don't assume anything. Like, I can't assume that the HR department knows what a 48-hour employee looks like a shift employee looks like, because they don't. And it's not that they're bad people. They just have never experienced it. I can't assume that the finance department understands why we need to buy 2 sets of bunker gear as opposed to 1, because they don't understand PFAS and cancer and all that kind of stuff. I can't assume the citizens, the business owners, the residents, nothing. You can't assume anything. So just on the smaller scale, the people you just mentioned, the people you're talking to, you can't assume they know your expectations. You can't assume because their tenure or experience or who they are. If you assume, you're setting yourself up for failure. But I think the biggest thing you said there was caring enough to sit down with them. That right there, I think, sums it up. You're not belittling them. You're not doing this in a negative way. You care enough to sit down to clarify the expectations. You care enough to build that relationship. That's huge. And you're doing that because you care. You truly care. If you didn't care, you wouldn't have the conversation. You would assume, like, yeah, they probably know it. Well, that's an uncaring feeling. So I love that you went there, but that's the biggest thing I took, because especially over the last year and a half, every time I've assumed something, I'm wrong. Now I have to correct it, and it takes a lot of time to get back on a track. So I'm glad you went there.
Well, leadership isn't overt acts of, knife handing and leading at a fire or whatever it is. Yes, those are important times. And there are times where, and those stories about how we've, acted at emergency scenes, the legend grows with the retelling. Every time we retell that story, it gets better and better and better. And like, Stephen was, such a badass on that thing. And, he was battling the beast and doing whatever, but it's not about overt acts, overt displays of being grandiose in our leadership style. Leadership is 1,000 acts of demonstrating that we care, thousands and thousands and thousands of acts of demonstrating that we care. And we do it in little tiny ways. And the people that really I knew cared about me the most were the ones that listened to me, and in little ways they showed that they cared about what was going on with me, and they're little things that seem very insignificant, So, but that's the thing about being a leader, is you have to be paying attention all the time. You have to set forth expectations and let people go, and let them find their own way, and let them work things out, but be ready to step in and mentor and coach immediately when you need to. It may seem that you're watching from a distance and you're not paying any attention, but you need to be listening all the time. You need to be paying attention
Yeah.
in a good way.
So let's talk about that. It's easy for us to talk about this from the beginning. In other words, you should start off with setting expectations. Your default setting should be starting with expectations. You shouldn't assume anything. But let's take it one step further. I think both of us could probably reach into our experience banks and kind of pull some examples here. But let's pretend that things have gone bad. The teams aren't performing. Initiatives aren't taking off. What are your ideas when it comes to and I'll use the word recalibrating. In other words, what does that look like when maybe the expectations haven't been set? What are some things that we can do to get back on track? Let's put it that way.
So if expectations haven't been set or they haven't taken root with people, maybe we had the conversation, but it didn't take root with people, or we didn't have the conversation at all. I mean, I think the thing that I would try to do, and the thing that I think that most people that are in leadership positions and care about it and are actually, I think that there's a lot of insecurity that goes with that. There's a lot of, and maybe it's not outward. Maybe there's a lot of, maybe you exude a lot of confidence and stuff, but there's a lot of second guessing that goes on when things aren't working right, and things aren't functioning at a high level in your station. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to own it. I'm big on accountability. And the first thing that I'm going to do is be very self-reflective and see, what did I bring to this situation where it's not working? And then try to walk it back and say, all right, here's where we are now. I'm sorry, it's maybe I didn't make things clear to you, but here's where we need to be, and give people an opportunity to, where we own it as leaders first, and then give everybody an opportunity to reset and self-correct. And then, if we have that discussion, ideally, if you have the discussion right off the bat, and things go the way that we discussed, then you never have to have that discussion again. But inevitably, you're going to have to have those discussions, because again, like I said, even good people are going to seek the lowest level sometimes, and they're like water. So we will have to have those talks sometimes. But just approach it from a standpoint of, maybe I wasn't clear, maybe I haven't explained this to you the right way. How can I help you get there so that we can function at a high level as a team?
Yeah, I like that. It's very much like the extreme ownership mindset. In other words, first look inside, self-reflect. What have I done wrong as a leader? Start there, show that humility, and kind of go forward. Yeah,
I think anybody that's in a leadership position, I think that there's a lot of, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I think there's a lot of agonization that goes on where you're like, oh God, am I doing it right? Am I reaching these people? Am I doing right by them? You know what I mean? It's like, there's a lot of paranoia that's associated with it. And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but if we're doing it right, we're losing sleep over being in a leadership position sometimes. The leader's pillow is not necessarily like a comfy place. I think about, in that regard, I think about when I got promoted to captain, the night before my first shift, and I had been an acting company officer in a basically full-time capacity for 5 years. We were that short on captains. And as a firefighter, I was riding up in the captain's seat on busy companies, our busiest company, for almost 5 years before I, finally got promoted. I took one captain's test and failed it, again, because of my arrogance and stuff. But the night before my first shift as a company officer, having done it for 5 years and experienced a lot in that 5-year time frame, I couldn't sleep because I wanted to make sure I was doing it right. And then, I realized, wow, there's no excuses anymore. There's no training wheels. I'm no longer a firefighter, riding up. It's me, and it all falls on me. I guess I realized that I sort of had a little bit of an out, a little bit of that substitute teacher mentality. And I realized that, oh no, this is it. And I gotta, show up, stand up and be counted. And it kept me awake that night. So
I dig that. So, I kind of turning more to the today, and looking in just this year, for example. Like I said, I was looking back at some of the articles, and I saw an article that you wrote earlier this year called "I'm Here," and it was really a great article. I thought it was a great article, but it's a very personal story and reflects on communication in today's age with the generations and whatnot. So, and if you're listening to this, I would encourage you all to read it. But in terms of that article, based on communication with today's generations, let's talk about that and weave that into the expectations talk today. Like, how important is that talk today? When you take that article you wrote and we talk about expectations in today's age with the generations of today, what does that look like? Like, how important is that today with today's generations to set those expectations?
I think it's more important than ever. I think simply because people, we've become so detached in terms of how we communicate that, I used to lament the fact that we would have a text thread that went on for the company officers on our shift. Hey, I'm doing this. Hey, I'm doing that. Hey, we're going to go train. We're going to do whatever, which it keeps you in the loop. It keeps you informed and everything, but you don't understand people's tone or their energy as much as you do when you pick up the phone and you call somebody. And I think that that's one of the things that we're really lacking nowadays. And I think that that's why it's so important that we, as old people on this earth, you're still in the fire service. I'm not, but I've got kids that are in their 20s, and they don't communicate the same way that we do. Mm-hmm. And we have to be able to have that face-to-face communication where they understand that this is how I communicate, and this is what I respond to, and this is the medium that we're going to have to use when we're in the station on calls. I'm going to talk to you, and this may be a sweeping generalization, but and I'm using my daughter again as another test case, but I think that they have a hard time understanding tone of voice, and body language and that kind of thing. That generation does. And so that's why it's so important to build that rapport and have that FaceTime with them in the same room and sit down and let's have this talk. I mean, it's not a foreign concept for you and me, but it is kind of a foreign concept for a lot of them, especially the kids that grew up, in the COVID age, where they got this forced isolation, and a lot of their relationships are purely through the rectangular device that they hold in their hand. And so I think that it's very important that we build that human connection and build that emotional response in them, and be there and be available for them. And I think that that's where that whole idea of, the most important thing a leader can demonstrate is I'm here. And I think that's the last line in that article or something, or close. But that was the main point. It's not just saying I'm here and typing it, on your phone and saying, "No, I'm here for you." No, it's actually being there and showing up. And, and I think that, as we go through life, that becomes more and more apparent to us as we understand the finite nature of life, and that we're not here forever. It's important that we show up. And while we're here, we need to really savor the experience, whether it be work in the firehouse, because it ends. And mine went very quickly. I mean, I did 25 and a half years in the fire service, and it flew by. I mean, I can't believe that it's over, so yeah. So anyway, I think that that's why it's so important, given the fact that a lot of people coming into the workforce nowadays don't have that connection, that human connection that we had when we were growing up, riding bikes together, hanging out in packs of kids. I mean, in my experience, kids don't hang out that way anymore, so that's why it's important that we introduce them to that culture, because that's what the firehouse culture is. It's us all hanging out together and sharing this experience together, not going to our rooms after a call and getting on our phone and talking to somebody else. No, let's talk to the people who are right here with us, getting on the rig and wearing job shirts, together. So anyway,
I'm sure everybody listening has those examples about communication challenges, let's say. And for example, my mind goes to a couple of years ago, I was going to our training site, and I remember going for some live burns in the morning. And when I got there was a lieutenant, a younger lieutenant who was there, and I approached him, and he approached me, and we started talking. And as I'm engaging with him, within I swear 10 to 15 seconds, he's reaching for his phone and looking at his phone and starts just typing away in his phone while we're having a face-to-face discussion. And I just kind of stared at him for a second, like, what is happening here? I didn't think much of it on that day. I just was cognizant of it, right? So the next morning, Same thing happened. I was there in the morning. We're doing a few days of live burns. I see the same lieutenant. I walked up to him. He walked up to me. We started talking. And he did the same thing. He slowly reached into his pocket, whipped out his phone within 10 seconds, and starts typing away as we're talking. And I remember kind of stopping. I'm like, hey, man, do you see what's happening here? And he looked up and he's like, what? And he wasn't like, what, like he was rude. He just didn't, he was oblivious. Like he was so used to using that phone and multitasking, talking to me, talking to a friend, texting somebody, getting back to somebody, that it literally didn't click with him. So I told him, I go, listen, not for nothing, but I'm trying to have a conversation with you. I'm trying to have a face-to-face conversation with you, and you keep going to your phone. And he goes, oh, and he put the phone away. He was totally non-malicious. He just didn't realize he was doing it. He put his phone away. So I'm like, no big deal. So the next morning, the third morning, I came out there, see him, he sees me, we walk up to each other, and I started talking to him, and you could see like his hand like default setting going for his phone, but he stopped midstream, and we kept having that discussion like face to face. But the takeaway was afterwards, we were kind of joking about it afterwards. I knew that his primary way of communicating was like texting. It's one of the things he likes to do. So I would always like text him when I needed to, but he knew that I gravitated towards face-to-face conversations. And going forward, when we got together, you could tell that he stayed longer in the face-to-face world than he did just going to his phone. So it was like, talk about expectations. The expectations were kind of set. And it was kind of like a growth experience for the two of us. It was so interesting. And I'm sure everybody listening has those things that they've experienced.
Yeah. And it's, again, like I think you hit the nail on the head. I don't think that anybody means to do it, but we all need to understand one another and how we communicate. And,
yep.
and if you make them aware of it, generally they'll be like, oh, okay, that's how Mark does it, or that's how.
Make them aware. Yeah.
Right. Make them aware of it. Because I think that, again, people want to, especially in our group, our world in the fire service, we want to please people and we want to make people comfortable. And I think that it's such a powerful thing. And it's such that dopamine hit that they get when they get a text and everything. But my thing is, I didn't understand when phones first became, smartphones first became like the thing in the fire service, like how much the old guys, when we would sit at the table and I was kind of late to the smartphone game, they would get really upset about guys being on their phones at the table during, breakfast or dinner or whatever at mealtime. And I didn't understand it necessarily. I'm like, I'll get over it, man. It's just like looking at the newspaper. Well, it's not. I mean, you're not participating in the conversation. You're having a conversation with somebody else. And there was actually a situation where some guys were actually talking behind their captain's back at a meal, and they actually accidentally responded to the wrong thread that their captain was on, and he saw it. He's like, "Oh, hey, man, are you guys talking about me behind my back at the dinner table?" It led to a big rift. So you got to be careful. But I just think that it speaks to being present and being, dealing with what's right in front of you. And I think that sometimes we don't do that, and it lends itself to a lot of distraction. Yeah. And we get distracted from those close relationships that we all want to have and we all crave as humans.
I like that. So, we've been presenting and teaching for a while. You're in your platform and just me and mine. And for you, as you reflect back on like presentations through the years, whether it's FDIC or other places, what kind of trends are you seeing these days? In other words, are there things that, from your original impetus into Fully Involved and then starting to teach at FDIC and then through the years, what trends do you see in terms of what we're talking about today or in general?
I think the trend that I see that's, if I could trace one common thread through my career and what I see now, is I think that people want to contribute. And the source of a lot of people's frustration is the fact that they don't feel heard. And they feel very frustrated, and they don't understand that the wheels of progress move very slowly in whatever industry you're in. And so, especially in the fire service, because it's not a profit motivated entity. So there's not a whole lot of money involved in terms of like what we do. So, without shareholders and that sort of thing, things seem to move kind of slowly. But I think what I see nowadays is, again, there's a frustration, and there's a tendency to act out, and there's a way that people are acting out now that seems much more immediate, and you can sense their frustration sometimes, and but there's a lot of good people with a lot of really good ideas, and what we have to do is find out what these people are frustrated about, and find out what's causing this passion to be diverted in the wrong direction, and find a way to access it, and nudge these people in the right direction. Because if you can get that energy that's turned negative because they're frustrated with their organization or their position within their organization, take it and move it in the right direction, and you can, those people will just go and go and go, because whatever they're passionate about really drives them, and there's usually a reason for it. So I don't think that that's changed ever since I've been in the fire service. I mean, ever since I got introduced to the passionate people that got me going and turned me onto some things in the fire service. I mean, those are the people that I sort of gravitate towards, and I see them everywhere. But we, as people who, have access to, whether it's the magazine or the conference or something like that, listen to these people and help push them along and push them in the right direction, and give them an outlet so that they don't burn out. Because that's the saddest thing to me, and is seeing people that get frustrated and burn out and quit on the fire service, or, whatever it is. Just keep helping these people that are passionate about the job, exercise their passions.
Yeah, give them an outlet. I like that. I don't want to see them burn out. So let me ask you this in another way. Again, using your experience and whatnot, is there any issues in the fire service these days that keep you up at night? Any concerns that you think of when you think about the fire service?
No.
I love it.
No, the only thing that I see that's a little bit alarming to me is some of the, because I think that there's very capable people that, I mean, I when I left the station and turned over the keys to Engine 65 when I left, I knew that there were perfectly capable people ready to take over the job, and people who care about the job, and maybe it looks a little bit different than it did for me, but I guess one of the things that I see that concerns me a little bit with, and maybe I'm going to sound old, but with the proliferation of social media and just a lot of the things that I see in terms of giving the middle finger to a lot of the standards that we have in place that a lot of people work really hard on, that have really helped keep firefighters safer. So I think that's one of the things that I see that I, if anything does keep me awake at night, it's this people taking those messages in the wrong way and taking it to an extreme. And that's always been a problem, no matter what it is, no matter what the topic is. But sometimes I fear that people will take, because we exist in the fire service on pride and anecdotes. We don't really like to do all the research. We like for someone else to do it, and then we see something cool and we're just going to do it. And we don't do it. We don't approach it from having done all of our homework and doing all the training and testing that goes along with it. And I think that sometimes there's a lot of stuff out there where people are going to try something that they're not necessarily skilled enough to do and don't have the right information to do it, or misapply a skill just because they think it's cool. That's kind of, if anything bothers me, it's that.
No, I got you.
And
to that point, you mentioned some names earlier, like, Brian Brush, for example, is a great example of a guy who's into the job, but also doing a ton of research. And this is just one guy amongst a whole host of people that are like very relevant today, very outspoken, but also doing a lot of research today and backing up their thoughts and their platforms with that research. And whether that's the Mayday stuff that Basil's doing, or the firefighter rescue survey, or all the stuff through the fire dynamics and whatever, there's a lot of research being done. So it's nice to see those people in those places, getting involved with those organizations. I think it was David Rose that was saying that these people that have these platforms need to infiltrate and get involved in these, whether it's IFSTA, NFPA, all these groups, and get involved. If you're going to say something, that's one thing. That's great. Get involved. Do something. Don't just bark at it, but get involved and be a force to get in there and make change, or at least understand what they're doing. So I dig what you're saying, man. Well, anyway, man, we're coming up on close to an hour here. So as we kind of do that, I wanted to kind of reflect on some of the things that we were talking about. And I think that having you on, how do I say this? It gave me what I needed to dive deep into expectations. Let's put it that way. I think that the whole conversation was focused on that, and it was nice to kind of reflect on that concept. But going back here, I think that we started off with you getting outside your world, seeing a bunch of people, meeting a bunch of great influential people, and then you started writing, which kind of gets you involved into starting fully involved. And I think that at the end of the conversation, you mentioned those people that are passionate about the job, maybe get a little frustrated, trying to help them find an outlet. And that's a good example, whether it's writing articles, whether it's getting involved, giving them some sort of way to have an outlet for that energy, that passion, because it's frustrating to see people lose the passion because they don't have the right outlet. So I'm glad you started, and then we ended there. I think that you mentioned, and this is probably a talk for another day, but Stoicism. I'm a big fan of Marcus Aurelius. I have that meditations book. I actually reference it quite frequently. It's in my office right now, so I'm glad you went there. And I'm glad we didn't go there, because that literally would have taken us to another hour of conversation. But we've talked about expectations and where that came from, and some examples of from the smaller scale to the larger scale, and how important it is to basically have those expectations for your people because you care. Not assuming was talked about. We talked about the danger of assuming, and the fact that when you have these sit downs with people and you're expressing your expectations, you're not doing it because you don't trust them or don't value them. You're doing it because you care, and that's huge. I think that you also mentioned. I'm trying to find can't hold a standard that you never set. I think that if anything that I'm taking notes on, that was a big statement there. You can't hold a standard that you never set. And I think that's bread and butter. It's bread and butter leadership, but it needs to be reset again. Leadership is 1,000 acts of showing that you care. I like that too. I think that if, for me, I'm a note taker, and I resonate with certain things, and I dig that, because some of the things that we consider small or little aren't little in other people's eyes.
Right.
So I think that's important that you said that. And you know what? Just the rest of this, talking about owning it when things don't go right, and then reinforcing with clarity. And then we talked about a little bit of the generations and face-to-face contact and how to build rapport with different people. So we went all over the gambit here, man. But I'm glad we just took the time to focus on expectations and the importance of that, and on a variety of levels here. So, as we come kind of close to the end of this, what are your final thoughts, man? Where does your mind go as you kind of come to the close of this discussion?
Well, just to kind of reinforce that whole idea of, leadership isn't about overt act. It's about thousands of acts of showing that you care about somebody. And I kind of hinted at the fact that there were leaders that I worked for who did things for me that were just kind, that seemed like they're nothing. I think about when I was a young firefighter on a mandatory shift, and I was in a hurry getting out of the station, and I left some of my stuff, which you sometimes do because we get detailed out to different houses, and I left my bedding at the neighboring station, and I drove to the neighboring district and showed up and unloaded all my gear from my car, and realized that I didn't have my bedding. I got all my gear on the rig, and I was like, oh, I don't have my bedding. And so I went and I knocked on the captain's door, and I said, hey, Cap, I left my bedding over at Threes. Can we go get it at some point today if it works out? And he goes, yeah, if it works out, but we're not going to make a special trip to do it. He goes, I'd feel pretty bad, and I think you would too, if we went, if we had a call for a baby choking in our district and we were over in District 3 so that you could get your bedding. And he goes, think about that, right? And I was like, oh, I'm like, what? People go out of district all the time to do stuff. What's the big? That's what I was thinking to myself. I didn't say it, but I was like, people just go run errands all over the place and nobody cares. It's just my bedding. I want to be able to sleep tonight if I can, And so I pouted about it for a couple of seconds, but then I just kind of let it go. And the day went on, and he said, make do with something that you can find here at the station. We've got some sheets and stuff that are clean and whatever. And then I said, okay. And so then we went on a call later in the day, around dinner time. A plane that was having landing gear issues going to the airport. And so we responded, and we drove right past Station 3 on the way, but I'd forgotten all about the bedding thing. And the plane landed safely, and we cleared the call. And my captain says to the driver, he goes, hey, Mark, the driver's name is Mark. He goes, drive by Station 3 real quick on our way back to district. And Mark, you can run inside and go get your bedding. And I was like, oh, I'd forgotten all about it. And it's really insignificant, but we had that dialogue in the morning. And for me, I think about, myself as a company officer, I probably would have forgotten all about that talk and just, you know what I mean? And maybe I wouldn't have, maybe I would have remembered, but I think sometimes we get so caught up and so wrapped up in the things that we have to get done, and all the busyness and all that stuff, that we forget that, if our people come to us and say that something's important to them, if possible, if we're not going crazy. I mean, it was my bedding, right? I could have slept with a blanket rolled up underneath my head or something like that, and with my turnout coat over me or something, to keep warm. But, it was just something that what it represented to me was that he heard me, and he cared about me, and he cared enough to try to make my needs something that were important to him throughout the day. And I don't know if he wrote a note down on a Post-it or what, or if he just remembered it, but I just think about how easily that moment could have been forgotten and been nothing, but it was something that stuck with me, 25 years later. And I actually, I'm writing something about that right now too, about how, little things like that show that you care. And that was a simple story, but it's very powerful, I think, in its symbolism. So, again, remembering what is important to your people, and then sitting down and really hearing them as we discuss expectations, that's what creates that trust.
You know what? You just ended it perfectly, right? I mean, I got nothing else. You ended it perfectly. That's a perfect way to just seal this up, man. I love it. Man, thank you for joining me today, man. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to reconnect with you and just revisit some of the things that have been kind of years and kind of since we first met. And I appreciate that, man. It's been great having you on.
It was a pleasure, man. Thank you so much. And I appreciate, your friendship, and thanks for seeking me out and doing this.
Absolutely, man. So, as we're closing this out, for everybody who's listening, I would challenge you to kind of just check yourselves in terms of, have your expectations been set? And on the other side of that, do you know the expectations of your team? This has been a great conversation. And, whether you want to talk to Mark and I about this, we're always available. Mark, where can they reach you at?
I'm going to sound old, but you can reach me at markvonappen@yahoo.com. Just if you want to send me an email, I'll give you my phone number and we can chat, whatever you want to talk about. So.
At least you didn't say AOL.com. At least you're okay.
Yeah, all right.
Almost the same. But
is that another one? Is that at me? Is that, what was that one? I don't even. That was before I had like the internet and stuff. But yeah, I mean, somebody hit me with that, like the whole "I'm here" thing. Somebody hit me with that. They're all, "Oh, you're old. You got a Yahoo."
Love it. All right, man. Well, once again, so thank you for being here, Mark. For all the listeners, thank you for listening. You're appreciated. It's much appreciated. Your time is valuable, and I'm actually very confident that today was definitely worth the time you spent here listening. So, thank you all. If you need us, you can reach out to us. These episodes drop on the second Friday of the month, and you can reach out to us at any time. And if we don't hear from you or see you until then, we'll be at FDIC next year, and we can keep talking about this then. So, Mark, thank you for being on today. Much appreciated, man.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, so everybody have a wonderful